Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to what is episode 29 of Stewarts Soundbites. Emma Lyons is having a well-deserved break this week, so I'm afraid you're stuck with me as guest host for today. My name is Nickie Maple-Pearson, and I'm an associate in the personal injury team at the Stewarts office of Leeds. This episode is pre-recorded, but if you have any questions, of course, feel free to email me after the session airs. I am absolutely delighted to introduce to you today Clare King and Lynsey Harrison of Clarion, who will be talking about the benefits of a joint approach when working with the Court of Protection and Personal Injury Trust clients. They have some awesome practical top tips that I'm sure you'll be able to take away with you. So before we start chatting, I should tell you that Clare is head of the Court of Protection team at Clarion and provides advice on a wide range of matters, including the administration of professional deputyship cases, advice on complex court applications, and the creation and administration of personal injury trusts. That's quite a mouthful, Clare. Lynsey is one of the country's leading contentious private client litigators. She is highly regarded for specialising in a complex area of mental capacity disputes and regularly advises clients with care and support needs and their families on Court of Protection and PI trust matters. So we're in very good hands. Clare, Lynsey, hello, and thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having us. Yeah, it's a pleasure.
And obviously for agreeing to offer your knowledge for a soundbite session.
Very welcome.
So perhaps to explain to the audience what type of work you do, could you outline what type of cases that you deal with on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. So as you said, I deal with the contentious side of things. My team, there's 5 of us here at Clarion that specialise just in contentious private client work. And we do a mix really of probate and trust litigation. So sort of will disputes, arguments over trusts and estates and that sort of thing. But then the other half of the work we do relates to mental capacity disputes in the Court of Protection. So we deal with objections to deputyship applications pretty regularly, statutory will applications, which is where someone lacks the capacity to make their own will, and the Court of Protection will make one for them. And very often they become very, very contentious. And unfortunately, a lot of what we do at the moment, and increasing, relates to financial abuse of people who are incredibly vulnerable. And we work a lot with Clare's team as well.
Yeah, so I head up the non-contentious Court of Protection side of things, which means that we manage a large amount of professional deputyships and trusteeships of either a person who lacks capacity or a person who's received damages for a catastrophic injury, and we help them manage that when they receive funds. I often work with Lynsey because we tend to have issues that arise like financial abuse or allegations of people not acting in the best interest of the person who lacks capacity. And it's extremely useful to have like a real expert within Clarion to dip in and out, because it's, you know, the person who lacks capacity, who, by the way, if I forget to say, we call P for shorthand. So if I can say P, that's you know what I mean.
Thank you for clarifying that, just in case anyone was wondering.
But Clare is selling herself short, because in the same way that she said that she uses me, I use her as well. And I think we've worked together for a really long time, and so we do work very naturally together. And actually what I'm really proud of is our teams now do as well. And so, you know, when you're looking at an initial application for something, they'll come and talk to our team about things that should go in there. We obviously, from a litigation point of view, we're thinking, okay, you know, managing timetables, looking at evidence, things like that, which is they're much more natural for a litigator to think about than someone that doesn't necessarily practice in litigation. But then saying that, Clare's team are absolutely fantastic with their knowledge of the Mental Capacity Act, where we can sort of cross over and they can help us with things, and it just works really, really well, doesn't it?
Yeah, because the beauty of working together is where like, people often come to us who either have very little experience of dealing with lawyers, and particularly people who might have been a victim of financial abuse or those type of cases where people will be nervous, people have their own like kind of preconceptions about what lawyers are like, and we sort of have to come in and kind of quickly build up a relationship of trust to be able to get to the facts and how we can advise people in those circumstances. So you know, sometimes the person in that capacity has been isolated for a long time, or sometimes you've got to get through sort of family and friends to get to the issues, and you know, you have to balance that between you, don't you, to make sure you're communicating effectively.
Well, you touched on financial abuse just now, and that's obviously I think quite a sort of big topic, but it's I'm sure it's a common concern that's raised by those who get in touch with you, and certainly something that arises on the cases that we deal with in the injury department. It might be useful, just, are you able to say from your experience what are some of the signs of financial abuse, and where should people seek advice if they're worried?
Well, I'll probably, shall I cover off kind of some like common signs, and you can perhaps talk about some specific cases. So, like, well, first of all, your gut reaction. Like, we generally, you know, you kind of know when something's wrong, and I think sometimes, whether it's a cultural thing, or whether we, you know, we don't want to be nosy, we don't want to stick our oar in where it's not wanted, but actually sometimes you never know what else is going on, and your, like, you know, interest might be the thing that finally brings something to the forefront and allows people access to help and assistance. Some of the classic signs that you might come across where you're worried about financial abuse. Someone might be defensive or secretive about payments that they're making. A person might seem unaware of payments that are being made either on their behalf or that they're making. An absolutely classic sign is where a person is gradually isolated by someone else. Sometimes it can be a new friend or contact, not always. And like a financial abuser, it, you know, is a skilled person who sets out to do this, and they will frequently gradually isolate a person away from their normal support network of family and friends for the purpose of taking advantage. So, you know, discouraging contact with family and friends, or discouraging existing relationships can be a sign. You know, other obvious things like, you know, someone's always bankrolling every outing or every meal out or every new car purchase and all that sort of thing for friends and family. And quite often, you know, whether if someone lacks capacity, are their immediate family and friends, is there someone who's secretive or obstructive about to other family members about what's going on in this person's life? That's pretty common, isn't it?
It is. I mean, financial abuse was actually the first case that I ever did back in, crikey, I think it was about 2002, and it was a financial abuse case that really piqued my interest in the area, because I just couldn't believe, I was obviously young and naive at that point, rather than old and cynical now, but I couldn't believe that somebody could do that to an elderly person. And this guy basically had all of his money taken and been left by his sister-in-law. And happily I wrote a really nasty letter to her, and she paid it all back, and that was me sold. Absolutely, you know. And ever since then, there's been so many cases that we've had to deal with where people have been abused by, a lot of the time, family members. Sometimes it's sort of churches or other organisations where the person is going to, and one person there will get involved and take money from them that way. We've had one recently where it was a carer, and actually in that case, the banks were the banks are much better than they used to be at helping flagging it up. Yeah, so it's someone that was going in and was sort of trying to cash checks for really spurious things, like, you know, £5,000 for a new boiler, and then £5,000 for a new boiler a couple of weeks later. And so I think it's a combined approach really that helps you to uncover it. The problem is, at the moment, obviously, in the current situation with the pandemic, people are even more isolated than they normally would be. So really, part of the problem as well is that there aren't many signs, because these people doing it, they know what they're doing, and they're hiding it. You've got the person that's being abused generally is, like you said, really embarrassed. A lot of times it can be a family member, so they don't want to say anything. And it's really, really hard to uncover it. So normally, by the time it comes to the, you know, to everyone realizing what's happened, it's too late. And at the end of the day, it is a crime. You know, it is a crime.
Of course.
It needs to be reported.
We learned, didn't we, when we did the trading standards, do a thing called Scam Champions, and Lynsey and I and some people, Clarion, did some training to become Scam fraud and scams. And during that training, there was a long discussion, wasn't there, about how people can feel worried or embarrassed to admit that they've been a victim of financial abuse. And actually, a financial abuser, it's a skilled person who sets out to commit abuse. And it is a crime. That's the most important thing. You know, there's nothing to be embarrassed if you're a victim of a crime. So, you know, again, part of the sort of building relationship and trust with people is to create an atmosphere where people are able to talk about their suspicions or talk about their own experience.
Yeah, it must be, in that respect, it must be such a rewarding sort of area to work, you know.
I was called a vigilante a couple of years ago, and hands down, that's my proudest career move.
Oh, 100%. That's a huge accolade.
Yeah, it's really thanks very much. It was from the financial abuser as well, which I was absolutely delighted about.
Oh yeah, string to your bow.
Exactly.
So for those watching, on a sort of a practical note, what advice do you have for the steps that someone should take if they are at all concerned about abuse, whether that be financial or otherwise?
Well, to stick to our tried and tested formula, I'll do the cover off the boring parts, and Lynsey can talk about the interesting cases that we've acted in. But certainly, if you are at all concerned about abuse, as you say, Nickie, be it financial or otherwise, if someone is in immediate risk of harm, then you call 999. Or if you are worried about them being in danger, but there's not necessarily an immediate risk of like danger to life, call 101. And you will then, you know, speak to people who are well versed in how to manage that sort of thing. If you have a lower level concern, there might be an ongoing situation of any abuse, financial or otherwise. You can go online, look for your local adult social care team, social services typically, they're called adult social care now. If you Google safeguarding, you will find out how you can make a safeguarding alert about your concerns. But anyone in a position where they have responsibility for someone's health and welfare, so you can raise a concern with a person's GP if you're in a position to do that, or another healthcare professional. And you know, if all else fails, there are various helplines, including the domestic abuse helpline, that people can ring for an immediate kind of signpost as to where they want to go. But the most important thing is not to feel worried, because if there's nothing to worry about, it will very quickly be dealt with and concerns will fall away. But the point is, you don't know, 5 other people might have expressed concerns, or there might be a person who's already known to adult social care. So you never know when your input might actually be the thing that gets some help and support for a person. So always err on the side of raising a concern.
Okay.
I think in my experience, there haven't been many cases where somebody has raised it as an issue and it hasn't been a thing. It hasn't been financial abuse. And as I said earlier, a lot of the institutions are getting much better at calling it out and dealing with it. And there are a number of community projects and charities and organisations, statutory bodies or otherwise, that are on it once they can get involved. So it is just flagging it to somebody, isn't it, and dealing with it. And we have had a number of cases dealing with financial abuse, and it can go on for a really long time. But it's just the quicker that you can flag it up and get it dealt with, and get it to somebody that can do something, whether that is the police
or even your local friendly expert lawyer. I mean, on a serious note, where people flag concerns to us, because where we deal with lots and lots of people with care and support needs, lots of times issues will arise which aren't necessarily what we're here to do, but we can absolutely signpost to the appropriate resources. So we're always very happy to talk to people. The important thing is that issues are raised, and if it's not something that we can help with, then we will absolutely signpost to where people can get help and assistance. So the headline is raise it with someone.
And just where you have, especially at the moment where people are generally a lot more isolated. I mean, one of my biggest cases that we had that went on for about 11 years in the end, the individual, the person that was abused, was very isolated. His daughter lived in the other end of the country. Someone had moved next door to him who financially abused him, and he had been completely isolated. And when we looked into it, a number of the neighbours had sort of said, oh yeah, I thought there was something, I thought there was something. And eventually we got them to all give statements, and part of that evidence was then put together. And once you, as you said, you know, it was earlier about being a litigator, you're looking for all the evidence, you piece it all together, and you're starting to see, so hang on, so that person was marched down to the solicitors, you know, wills were written the day that that person had left hospital with dementia. You know, okay, there's neighbours expressing concerns, there's daughter saying she's the other end of the country, and you start to put it all together. And and in that case, he absolutely did, and we ended up getting him put in prison.
Oh well, it sounds like
we managed to,
yeah.
Yeah, we got him. He absconded to France, and we actually had to overturn a will because the police had concerns that because he was the gentleman's beneficiary and executor, we actually had to overturn the will first, then give the file to CPS, who did an international arrest warrant, brought him back from France, put him on trial, and he went to prison.
Oh, so it sounds like a movie.
Yeah, it was great. It was a long time coming. But unfortunately, as is often the case in that situation, it had all gone. You know, there was literally, and it's one of the saddest things I'd ever heard, because the worst part of it was that he had got rid of gentlemen's war medals, everything that he owned. By the time,
that wouldn't mean anything to him, but meant a lot to
yeah, of course.
It's just horrific.
Oh.
So the sooner that people can get involved and say something and speak about it.
Yeah. So saying something's never going to do any harm. If you have any suspicions whatsoever, your advice is just to speak up and say something. So just sort of moving on slightly, I'd say that an issue that comes up quite a lot in our cases is where a client doesn't have capacity, is that that person's best interest is not being represented. For example, a parent who will almost certainly be well-meaning, but isn't allowing their child, for example, access to appropriate support or advice. And what advice would you both have in terms of anyone with these types of concerns?
I mean, again, common theme that's emerging from today's conversation is to you know, if you have concerns about a situation like that, just talk to particularly a legal advisor who's already and so on. Because, you know, being a parent, and you know, we are both parents, like, you know, we're fortunate not to have been involved in that particular situation, but certainly you can't take the emotion out of it when you're a parent. And they might be able to support a child in 99% of the ways that are required, but you know, with litigation proceedings, actually it's probably an advantage sometimes to take the emotion out of it and to be more objective. So I suppose that's an angle you can approach it from, because you know, there's no doubt that in some situations a legal professional would be a really appropriate litigation friend in order to support the person who is going through the proceedings. And it's sensitive, isn't it, in how to approach it, and it, you know, the approach might be that actually in this particular set of circumstances, an independent legal professional will be able to take out the emotion from it and look at it purely from a legal point of view. And certainly the joint approach between Lynsey's team and my team in terms of contentious and non-contentious legal advice can help, because we're sort of in quite a unique position to be able to deal with a litigation friend, aren't we, and then ongoing advice to the family who've got a child with care and support needs.
And that's it really. You know, as a parent, I don't have to worry about that, and I can't therefore imagine how difficult it would be. And frankly, a parent in that situation has so much to be dealing with.
Yeah, of course.
What we hope we offer in that situation is that support, so that there's a whole chunk of stuff that they don't have to worry about, because they're in good hands. We are, you know, like to think we're pretty normal, and you know, we can work with the family and just try and help them along that process as much as we possibly can.
I think, like under the mental capacity act, you actually have a statutory duty to find the least restrictive option to support a person with support needs and who may lack capacity, for example, to conduct litigation proceedings. So those types of situations aren't about us riding in, taking over, and like, you know, disempowering parents from having, you know, their role in their child's life, but it is about us coming in and offering access to our experience and our support. And actually, you know, if you are dealing with a child who may have had a catastrophic injury, who may have lifelong health challenges, you know, imagine how full up your brain is of care and managing day-to-day things, medical appointments, that sort of thing. Actually, sometimes it might be a relief to hand over to a professional litigation friend to actually worry about the sort of paperwork and legal side of things.
Yeah, definitely. We definitely come across that too. You know, litigation friends or parents just being too completely overwhelmed with everything. So I can't believe how quickly 15 minutes goes. Emma's right. She says it every week, but it's so true. So we've probably actually run over a little bit, but I'm sure that's worthwhile. No, not at all. I know, and that really comes across, and I'm sure it's come across to all of our audience. So thank you so much. I'm sure every person clicking the leave button is going to go away slightly better equipped to deal with these very sensitive situations when they arise. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Before we sign off, I should probably do a bit of a spiel. Emma gets another break from Soundbites actually next week on the 14th of April, as instead Warren Maxwell and Nicola Fosler are hosting 3-hour-long seminars over 3 days, Tuesday the 13th to Thursday the 15th of April, all at 1 p.m. They're just a continuation of what was supposed to be a 4-part collection of seminars aimed at case managers and rehabilitation professionals. That started in autumn 2019 and obviously scuppered by COVID-19. We have some really excellent speakers joining us over the 3 days. So please do register your interest either on our website or keep an eye on our LinkedIn. As ever, thank you having me, Em, whenever you watch this, and for trusting me to host your Soundbites. Thank you to everyone for tuning in, and it's goodbye from me, Clare and Lynsey. Thanks ever so much.
Bye.